Hey there. Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name is Renee Lavallee Mckenna, and I bring my 30 plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about the gifts of failure. And we live in a very achievement-oriented society, and a lot of achievement is based on getting the approval of others. And certainly the way that most American schools are set up, testing quizzes and homework and writing composition papers are all about trying to figure out what your teacher wants and give it to them so that you'll get an A. And although certainly there are alternative schools and systems of education, for the most part, we are not rewarded for creativity or thinking outside the box, which in my opinion is what the world really needs right now, looking toward new and innovative solutions rather than revisiting and regurgitating what we already know. But that is what we teach our children to do, and it's a huge part of our culture. And although there's certainly nothing wrong with pleasing others or doing what's expected of us, it's very easy to get stuck in black and white or even fundamentalist thinking about things being good or bad, desirable or undesirable, and an oversimplification of the idea of success or failure, that it's either or, which can actually breed a lot of fear and anxiety about the future if we don't do things perfectly, if we don't follow the prescribed rules or the kind of cultural path that's been laid for many of us. And if we stray from that path, we may crash and have a catastrophe, when in actuality what happens is we find a different path. This is particularly acute right now. I have a lot of teens and young adults in my life either applying to college or already in college. And I have to say, I've gotten kind of disheartened with the entire educational system. And as my own children have moved through high school and said, what we're learning is stupid, I have to say that I agree with them to a large extent. And I also have a lot of grown-ups in my life who are really struggling with their own fears of success or failure for their children. And the main thing I want to say to almost all of them is chill the fuck out, that everyone has their own unique life path. And some of the really important inner work is to really assess our ideas of what success and failure means. And I myself have had a lot of what many would call success, and I've also had a lot of what many would consider failure. Been married, had 2 beautiful kids, was a Girl Scout leader and an art teacher. I've written a book. I have a great career doing something I love. I've also been divorced twice, filed bankruptcy, and had a long struggle with addiction to drugs, alcohol, food, and emotionally unavailable men. I've had severe depression, chronic anxiety. I've also got to travel around the world and have a lot of adventures, with many more to come. And over time, I have either dropped or outgrown this idea of success or failure completely. And from my perspective now, it's all just experience. That we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and that our souls are each having, hopefully, an interesting and fulfilling journey through this human life. And the places where things are difficult or easy, pleasant or painful, these are information, and that we're in a conversation with the life force. And there's what we want from life, and there's what life wants from us. And the things that work out for us lead us in one direction, and the things that don't work out for us lead us in another direction. And that the important thing is that we're in flow and movement that feels healthy, satisfying, and enjoyable for us. And tragically, many people don't consider how they feel about their life as a factor in their success. That success is measured by some resume or the physical components of their life. How much money they have in the bank, what kind of job title they have, if they have a spouse or no spouse. And I've worked with plenty of married people in big jobs with a lot of money who hate their work, are unsatisfied in their relationship, and the money that they have does not buy them happiness. I was talking to a woman yesterday who happens to love her work. She's a middle school teacher. And she was saying, but my husband hates his work, but he's stuck in this job and he has no choice. And I had to say, wait a minute, we always have a choice. Why is he choosing to do something he hates? And she said, well, it's for the money. And so is the money making him happy? No. And so why is he doing something that he hates? And when we can take responsibility for that, it can really open up our options in ways we actually might not want to look at, because we always have options. And if we're unhappy in major areas of our life, we always have the power to bring positive, constructive change to those areas. But it may require us to step off of some prescribed path, or what we believe to be the ideas of success or failure, or what's acceptable or unacceptable, or normal or abnormal. And a lot of times we're unconsciously attached to these norms, to these cultural expectations we don't even know we have, which often kind of equal out to life sucks, then you die. And I'm much more of a fan of the idea of live as if your life depended upon it, because it does. But many of us have been indoctrinated into caring more about what other people might think about us or how we're perceived than what our actual experience is. So we do what we think we're quote unquote supposed to do, rather than what feels authentic and nourishing to our own soul and personality self. And for many, it is normal and certainly very common to hate what we do every day for 8 or 9 hours, or at least to find it unfulfilling and meaningless, and to be involved in dynamics with family or romance or friendships that are also draining or depleting. I have a client that has 2 sons. One's in college and one is applying right now. And the one that's already in college did fine in high school, did his required extracurriculars, and got into a perfectly fine school. Although he is going to carry a lot of college debt, which is also a norm in our culture. And the younger one, who's actually quite smart, has taken some not so great grade averages in some of his classes. And mother was really worried that he's going to set himself up for failure. And they've had some really powerful conversations because she's been struggling. He doesn't really want to listen to her and do what she wants. And he basically said, Mom, you've been working at a job that you don't like for the last 10 years. Why would I want to do what you're doing? I don't want your program. You might be set up for retirement, but you're not having a good time in adulthood. And he reminded her, look at Grandpa. He never even went to college. He started his own business, did something he loved, was perfectly fine. I was recently talking to one of the many 18-year-olds in my life, and his grandmother was really pressuring him to sign up for community college. And he just graduated high school. He's super bright, but the COVID Zoom high school experience was not the best for him. He didn't bring in the good grades that he might have. And by the time he was in senior year, he really didn't care. And Grandma's afraid if he doesn't go to college now, he never will, and that means some terrible thing will happen to him. And I said, what do you want to do? He said, I'm so sick of going to school. I really would rather just get a job. And I said, well, why don't you do that? Why don't you just get a job? And then over time, if you decide you want to go to college, you can do that later. And this is a kid who's always had pets, particularly loves reptiles. And he said, you know what I'd really love to do is get a job at the vivarium, which is a big local reptile pet store. And so he went online. They had a couple openings. He wrote a great cover letter. I helped him edit a little bit, and he got the job. And he absolutely loves it. He said, I would do this for free, and they're paying me. So fun. And I said, that's how I feel about my work. I love what I do. And I believe that potential is within all of us. And he may or may not go to college, become an official biologist, but who cares? That may not be his path. But he's on his path now, discovering, exploring, and pursuing things that he really likes. And when we're focused on these ideas of outward success or failure that are generally given to us by some external ideas of family or culture or school, they're often not connected at all with our own joy. And all of the great spiritual teachers that I listen to will tell you, follow your joy. That is God's will for you. That's the life force path that you can trust. Even though it might be risky, might be unusual, might not be the map that everyone else is following, but happiness and fulfillment are available to all of us. I'm sure of it. Took me a very, very long time to find my quote unquote calling in life. I was in my late 30s, and I'm really starting my full career now in my late 50s. I'm not on the same time track as everyone else. I'm just getting started when a lot of people are retiring. It's fine with me. And one of the great freedoms that come when we begin to look at life as an unfolding adventure rather than a path of success or failure is that all kinds of possibilities open up. and we get to move forward into new creative possibilities that we might not have considered before. Quite a few of the most intelligent, satisfied, and even quote unquote successful people that I have met did not graduate from high school. Now, I know some people who didn't graduate from high school who did not do so well, but it's really unique to each person. And so even that kind of baseline of, well, at least you got to graduate from high school can be a question mark. So when my daughter had this terrible social experience at the fancy high school she was at, and she decided, I'm never going back to that school. And I said, I don't blame you. If anyone treated me like that at a job, I would never return to it. And we sat discussing what the options were to do. And frequently, when things fall apart or end or take a turn that we didn't expect, it actually opens up a whole new realm of possibilities if we're open-minded enough and perhaps brave enough to be able to look at them and not get caught in fear of failure. My bankruptcy was a huge turning point in my life, as were both of my divorces. And at this point now, I don't consider any of that failure. It was all really interesting directive experience that led me into new places I wouldn't have gone if those things didn't happen. I think of my friend Jolene, who had a terrible car accident, hurt her back, ended up needing extensive chiropractic and massage care, ended up leaving the corporate job that she was unhappy at, going to massage school, and ended up starting her own massage and healing spa. Loves her work. Came out of a perceived tragedy. It was out of bankruptcy and divorce that I ended up taking a trip, meeting my second husband, which brought me to San Francisco and introduced me to depth hypnosis and the spiritual psychology work that I now love myself. So we talked about lots of different options. And I said to my daughter, if you want to quit high school and go to beauty school or pursue some other kind of vocation and start working right now, we can always look at getting a GED or college later. But I don't know what the best path is for you. And ultimately, she decided, no, Mom, I want to have a high school experience. And I said, great, you never get to complain to me about high school. And she hasn't, actually, except to say that it's stupid, which I agree with a lot of the time. But we've decided to play by the traditional rules. And wherever life takes her, that will be her experience. Because ultimately, we are here just having an experience. At the end of our life, we don't get to take any of it with us. Not our money, not our body, not our relationship, or our perceived successes or failures. So how is it to make choices based on the felt experience that it will give us, rather than on some future idea of safety or what others will think of us? How would it be to follow your joy rather than someone else's idea of success? And what does success mean to you, or failure? I know for myself, I realized about 7 or 8 years ago that I needed to write a book, because if I got to the end of my life and I didn't, that I would be disappointed in myself. And I had to let go of the idea if the book would be a success or a failure and just write it for the purpose of writing it. And it was an incredibly transformative and expanding experience. And to be perfectly honest, my goal for myself is to have no regrets, or at least as few as possible. That doesn't mean I do everything, because we can't do that. We need to choose wisely, again, the things that are meaningful, joyful, or feel good to us. And we can trust that as the unique map that we each have, our own felt experience, and how to align ourselves with the larger life flow that has a meta awareness of our soul's desires. And we can start pursuing those at any time. It's never too late. 60 to 80 years old is going to be the most exciting, engaged, and fulfilling phase of my life. I'm sure of it. A lot of time we have come to associate something ending with failure. And there's a lot of ignorance in that, because we live in a realm of impermanence. Everything is constantly changing. Everyone is constantly changing. All relationships will end. Every job will end. Every house will fall down. Every person will die. And we can accept that as a fact and align ourselves to it, or we can consider it as a design flaw and that something's wrong. Our medical society often looks at death as failure. We look at the ending of relationships as failure. This is actually completely disrespectful to what has been created or experienced during that life or during that relationship. And when we shift our attitude out of this success and failure dynamic and into one of a series of deep experiences that have a beginning, they have a fruition, and then they have an end, then our attitude of appreciation, gratitude, and a wisdom about accepting what each experience has offered or taught us or how it's changed us as we move through the winding, twisting paths of life gives us a lot more leeway and a lot more grace and even gracefulness in our attitudes toward ourselves and our opinions about others. And so I encourage you to consider what you hold as the failures in your life. How have they molded you, changed you? How have they redirected you? And when we hold them as direction, can we see the deeper wisdom, the divine life flow moving through our life? Perhaps giving us what we really need rather than what we think we want. Many things in my life I wished for, and then I look in hindsight, I'm so glad those didn't work out. And to think deeply about what success actually means to you. Is it about the acquisition of money or property, power or prestige? Or is success actually about living fully and deeply and engaged in fulfilling experience or series of experiences that continue to unfold in hopefully interesting, exciting, fun, and enjoyable ways? So be careful how we project our ideas of success or failure onto others and ourselves, and live as if your life depended on it. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this podcast, I'd appreciate 5 stars on Spotify or a good review on iTunes. This podcast is now available on YouTube, along with other interesting video content of healing sessions and workshops I've done. Deep gratitude to my supporters on Patreon and through this podcast. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee Lavallee Mckenna for Spiritual Psychology.